Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're talking about emotive players or GMs and
Yeah, both players.
what does that mean?
Emotive, right? I think when people in while they're playing, they get really emotional about their games, and you want. For me, this gave me the idea that you really want players who are invested. As a GM, you really want players who are invested in their characters and therefore in the game. For me,
In my search for topics for gaming perspectives, I came across this topic on Reddit.
oh
And
yes,
when I was reading it, it was a very weird read for me because the person, I think it was a girl. I'm not sure because I didn't look at the name. I don't even know if there was a name. Anyway, she said, or the person said, that when she runs a game, she's been running for about a year,
okay,
she feels like she is very invested in the way, in everything, her NPCs, what happens to the characters during the big battle, what's going to happen to the town that she created and stuff like that. And I was like, that's very interesting. I'm not completely clear about what she goes. I'm so emotive. And so I asked Saul, what does that mean? I mean, I understand what the word means, but because our table usually isn't all that
emotive.
emotional unless it's laughing out loud and can't stop.
Yes, I think a lot of new GMs, especially if they're younger, they take things a little bit more at heart because they've probably been influenced by a lot of
They're from a different generation.
there's a different generation, but they've been influenced by certain TV shows, especially if they've just recently got into D&D. Probably been interested by Critical Role, and if you watch that show, it's really a dramatization of a D&D game. Nobody, well, okay, I want to say nobody plays that way, but I think they talk over about what they want to happen in the game before the cameras come on, because I'm sure they have a lot of what is that,
Spontaneity.
spontaneity, and talking about being able to go off the cuff really quick. I always talk about that in RPGs. What is that word?
Oh my Lord.
Do you know what the word it is?
Yes. You're talking about improv.
Improv, yes.
That is not a S
Or a T.
or a T.
I was totally off. I mean, Critical Role, they're very trained people. They do that for a living. And either they're really good at spontaneity and improv, or they talk about where their character is going to go and what their motivations are, and then they film the show. And I think when you look at that show and they're so emotive and they have the characters' voices, people go, "Wow, that's really cool. I would want to mimic that kind of gameplay at my table." So when a D and D, when you D and D, so when a person new to D&D probably uses that as a reference, they're like sold in on the being emotional at the table or showing emotion and having those kind of interactions with your players.
I think that's probably true.
Okay.
And I'm thinking that when this young person who has experienced this sits down at a table with people from all ages playing Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, they're going to come across a wide variety of players and how they play, because most people, not most people, most of the players that I've seen play games that I've played with are not that like that. They're very different. Like they're either metagaming, my character's going to do this, or, well, that's not necessarily metagaming, but they sometimes talk in character, but most often they're talking to each other about what they're going to do, and then they roll the dice and do what they're going to do. And there's not a lot of emotive stuff other than in the games that I play in. There's a lot of laughter, and people are invested in their characters, but not in a emotional way that they show, right?
Right. Right. I think I was going to share a story about when I was running a Tales from the Loop. And for some people, I guess, Tales from the Loop can cause memories from when they were kids, and if they had a bad, middle school, what they call middle school now, I think
Middle school.
us it was junior high,
Yeah.
and high school memories, it could trigger some of those bad thoughts and experiences. And unfortunately for me, or fortunately, I had a pretty good childhood. I've talked about that. It was pretty idyllic for me. Looking back at it, I mean, I was a pretty happy-go-lucky kid, and sure, I got into fights in high school and stuff, or junior high, but they were nothing of consequence, right? And they were usually over something stupid, usually. But other than that, there was the bullies that I had to deal with, but I didn't. They didn't throw me into cans. They didn't shove me into lockers. They were just verbally abusive, and then at the same time, I was a smart mouth, and I could get back at them and get them back by making them mad, which I thought was kind of funny because they never really beat me up, but they would come up to me and say stupid things, and so I'd say things back to them. So other than that, it wasn't like a terrible experience.
But some people
But
have.
some people have a really rough one. So I remember I was running Tales from the Loop, and I just had this situation where some kids drowned off the beach in Monterey, and the reason I put it in Monterey instead of some city I've never been to, like the one in Sweden that's in the book, or the one in somewhere in Nevada, is that I like to reference places that I know and local people. Usually, I play at conventions, and when I play local conventions, people can know those locations and say, "Oh yeah, I know where you're talking about." So I included a real location here in the Bay
In
Area,
Monterey.
in Monterey Bay, actually, a specific beach. And then I noticed a guy was like, I don't know why I noticed it or how I noticed it, but then I go, "Are you okay?" And he goes, and then he wasn't in character. He said, "Oh, in real life, his a couple of friends had died by drowning at that beach, and that was in my game." And I'm like, okay, that's what happened, but let's keep going. And I could tell that he was upset, and I couldn't tell. And right now, I don't remember how, whether it was just he looked uncomfortable or something like that. But
He started bawling at your table.
no, he did not. But I could tell something was up. So
So as a good GM, you bypassed it
right.
and
I
said,
said,
"I'm
let's not
really
talk.
sorry about that. Let's move on."
And we took a break.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I apologized to him. He goes, "Oh, no, it's okay." He goes, and it was like when he was 11, right? I'm like, God damn, I hit it like right on the nose for that situation to happen.
And that's going to happen in games.
And yeah, you're good when you're playing any kind of game. Something's going to happen. I know there's safety tools now, and a lot of people use them. I still am not that I'm not comfortable. I'm just not used to using safety tools, and so
I use the safety tools when we're playing with Morgan and Bay and Shannon. They don't know. I usually at the table I just cross my arms. I go, no, don't talk about that.
oh, in that sense, yes. So I mean,
Usually it has to do with clowns. So
yes, and then I think what happens is that that kind of situation does happen, and that's unfortunate. But we're not talking about that. We're talking
No.
about players who are so invested in their characters and they're really into their characters. Sometimes they get emotional during gameplay.
we are talking about that because you told the story. That's
Right.
what I mean. You're talking about how he got emotional because
Right.
it triggered an experience
Right.
that he had
That's
had.
right. That's true. That's true. But that's not what I was going for. It was just the situation that happened to.
Showing how some people, what can happen when people are emotional at a
Right.
table. Right.
Right. I think when people do it on purpose, it's a different story, and they're trying to get some depth in their gameplay. Right. When that lady who's GMing emotes so much is because she wants a deep game where everything kind of matters. Right. The NPCs are real. They have real feelings, and the players are supposed to interact with those players and care about them. I think
Right.
that's why.
And that a lot, and I think that a lot of GMs who are either new or are really invested in every single campaign or session they put out. I'm not sure it's a good thing or a bad thing, but they're very invested in their NPCs and their towns, and they put a lot of work into it, right?
Right.
And they have stats and names, histories for all of these different players. And if the party bypasses the person that they wanted them to talk to, they get very upset, or not upset, but they get disappointed, basically,
Right.
that the players didn't do what they thought they were going to do.
Right. And that's always the
And that
problem.
can make the GM feel bad, like disappointment, right? Oh,
Of course.
they didn't do what I wanted them to do.
Or they didn't do what I thought they were going to do, right? And
Right.
I think that's true, but I think that situation is better than, let's say, a GM who doesn't put a lot of stock into their NPCs instead of just throwing people out there for you to slaughter, because then you get murder hobo game, right? Where characters on both sides, the NPCs are like pieces of wood, and the characters or the players are like just this murdering machines that go out there and kill stuff and take their stuff, kill things and take their stuff.
Well, that's what I think she was talking about, how she was really invested in the game because she was worried that what was going to happen to the town during the big battle, right? Not worried, but she felt emotional at the table, and she was wondering. Her question on Reddit was,
Okay.
"Is this normal?" Because she'd only been playing for a year,
Right.
and so of course on Reddit, everybody chimes in, and they're usually good answers. So a lot of GMs chimed in, or people that have been playing for a long time, and said things like, so all of the GMs, they chime in and they say, or people who have played for a long time, they say, of course you need to be invested in your game and your characters, or why would your players come back to the table? And I thought that was very interesting how, so they're going, it's okay for you to be emotional about it. You're worried about what's going to happen. That just means that you're in the game.
Right.
You don't want to be too emotional where you break down and can't play. But
I mean, if you are that, it could be a problem.
and I see, I'm not all that. I don't know how you say invested. I have a lot of characters that I play, and I put a lot of. I don't put a the like for the Friday nights game. You gave me like 30 minutes to make a character, and so my investment in that character is not necessarily huge, but I already feel like her, and she's a fighter, so she's gonna go out and fight things.
Kick butt. I think that what you're saying is that there's a difference between like being really emotionally invested in the game and then being invested in your character.
Right.
Like if your character died, you're not going to start bawling because your character died.
No, because I've learned that death is always on the table.
There's that too. I mean, I think when you start the game, people have to realize this is a game, and sometimes there's bad consequences to certain actions. And
If you do things that are, I don't like the word stupid, but if you do things that are not very smart, you may end up killing yourself and your party members.
and sometimes it has nothing to do with whether you play smartly or not. Sometimes it's just the way the dice roll. You could roll two critical hits on me and kill me right out. I mean that's a definite possibility. Or I could do that, especially when characters are low level, and even if they're not low level, things like that can happen. And if you're playing with dice on the table and you're not fudging dice and stuff like that, then things like that can happen. And sometimes players are trying to play heroic, and they're like, I'm going to go and save my friend who's almost down, and there's always that odd playing in the back of your mind. I think for some players, where they're like, well, I have a pretty good armor class, I have 6 hit points. They would have to roll maximum damage to down me, blah blah blah.
I'm not sure that that's what people think, although I'm sure some of the boys do. I've seen them calculate
Exactly.
that, but with our current game where we were first level, now we're second level, but when I was first level, it really only took 2 hits to kill me, and I got
Well,
pretty close.
this is D&D 5th edition,
I know, but
so there's no you're not that close to death. You would have to roll.
I was at 1 hit point.
Yeah, but even then, you have to roll 3 death saves, and then people
But
can
that
come
was
and
not what I
fight
was
you.
talking about. What I was talking about was in that, and when I was at 1 hit point, I was like, well, I knew Mike was down low too, and we were fighting goblins. These goblins had to have like 30 hit points
They had
each.
seven, the seven, exactly seven.
But
But there was a whole bunch.
there were a bunch of them, and they did a lot of damage
I
because
was rolling good.
they did like 7 or 8 damage
I know.
to me each time. And for a person with 16 or 17 hit points, that wasn't
That's a
very good.
lot, yes. And now just the way the luck rolled. I mean, sometimes I could have rolled a bunch of ones or
But
twos.
in the moment, I was like, okay, I'm at 1 hit point. If I engage and don't just sit down here on the battlefield, then I'm gonna die, and the
You
guys are
did.
not gonna
You
be.
sat down,
I
didn't you?
did because I was like, I couldn't. I could have. There was no one else for me to fight,
Okay.
and I couldn't get to where Mike was, and I knew Mike was hurt too. But Sip took care of it, so. But we none of us had any hit points. I mean, it was like,
It was desperate measure, desperate times, and that's what you want. You want, I
but
think,
I was engaged in it because I didn't want my fellow players to die,
right.
right? So I
Go
felt
down.
I would feel bad, and I didn't want to die myself because I couldn't help him if I was dead.
Right. And I think that's pretty cool. I mean, when you're worried about stuff like that, and you in the game, and I think that's the way games should be. They shouldn't be like, well, I don't care if I go down. I'll just make another character, or I don't care if the party dies. We'll just make new characters. I mean, there's some people who are like that, and when you're playing with people like that, and or you train your character players to be that way, then you just have a bunch of murder hobos that don't care less, and then your the characters that they play and everybody they encounter don't matter, and that's might as well play a board game or something in that case. But we're playing role playing games, and we want to be invested in our characters, and I think when that happens, when the players and the GMs are invested in the characters, I mean, and the GM has characters, right?
Right.
He has all the NPCs in the world, and the players have their own characters. They might have a familiar or a companion of some sort, but for the most part, if they care about their characters and the GM cares about the world and the NPCs, even a little bit, it makes for a better game because people make decisions based on what they perceive are real situations.
Not only that, the thing, even as a GM, when you're running the monsters,
Okay.
sometimes you're like, oh my goodness, these players are just they're gonna kill my monster, right? It's the big monster that I put out.
Oh
I
yeah.
obviously didn't make it strong enough because in 3 hits it's almost down.
Right.
And you're thinking in your head, well, one, it should take more than 3 hits to kill the big bad
Sometimes it doesn't.
that the that the play well in your head though
Oh yes.
you're thinking
When you set it up.
it should take more than that because you want to give the players a exciting thing. And I John comes and hits him, and then Tony hits him, and then he's down.
Right.
And you're like, oh, and they're like, that's it.
Well, in the game, we're playing the Lost Mines of Fandelver, and they're just got into the Crag Mount hideout, the caves, the first dungeon type adventure or part of the game, and you guys had more problems with the goblins than you did with Clark and his wolf. The Clark and his wolf went down fast. It was like boom, boom, boom,
I know, I was shocked
and I'm like, holy crap! The big guy.
because we almost died a
Yeah, you
couple of
guys were
times
hurt.
getting to that point in the game.
That's what I meant. It's like all the. I don't think Clark hit any of you.
He did.
Oh,
I was down to 4 hit points.
well, okay, but you guys had been whittled down more by the goblins.
Yes,
Than
I
Clark
understand, but
and
I'm
his
just but Clark and his wolf
wolf. And you guys.
didn't have a chance because they took out people started using their bows. So
Well, let me say he went down a lot quicker than I thought he would because he was the toughest one
Right.
there, and I'm like, and he was made to be tough. He was
Right.
like the end boss,
he was a bugbear, so of course he
of
was.
course, and he had more hit points than the little goblins that you were attacking or were attacking you, and so I was kind of surprised that it went that way. Now I didn't fudge and give him more hit points. I didn't fudge and say, "Oh, he's still alive" and stuff like that.
Did you feel any emotion about him though at all?
No,
See,
see, and the problem I had with this is because it's not really my game. It's a
Right.
pre
You didn't
published
create
adventure.
him.
It's a published adventure,
Right.
and I'm running it, and I'm just reading along, and I'm like, oh, and I'm like, I'm not invested in it, but at the same time, I'm trying to make it interesting for the players, right? So
Well,
when
you are invested in it.
I am invested, but not like I was invested in making Clark and naming him and his wolf. I forgot his wolf's name. Uh, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a cool adventure. You know, in my mind, I was already seeing how it was going to play out. And because I didn't make it in my mind, right, when I didn't dream it up. So when I read things, usually it's a little different.
Right.
It's a little bit more
So running a published adventure
for me.
is different than running the adventure that you made all the
Of course,
NPCs, right?
of course.
Even the bad guys.
Even the bad guys and even everything is different, right? Because when you put stuff to paper, I hate to sound like a cliche or what does he call it, like pompous, but when you put stuff to pen to paper and or type it out, whatever you call it, I still put stuff in. I still write things. In fact, my notes here are written to a notebook. When you put it to pen to paper, it's you, right? You are oh, this is going to be a good one. All these ideas go through your head as a GM, and you think it's going to be exciting for your players, and you're excited about it. And I think that's a little bit different from reading the published adventure. Though you could get like, wow, this is a really neat part of the adventure when you're reading it, and that might give you that same kind of feeling. But for me, definitely coming up with my own stuff is a little different than it's much different actually than published adventures that I run. Now I have no idea what your hit points were or what level you were. I wasn't keeping track of that, and I didn't want that to influence me because that would want to make me to pull my punches, and stuff
Right,
like that,
right.
which I didn't want because sometimes that does happen, and I've done that in the past. But I forget it's really hard to die in fifth edition, so I shouldn't worry about that. Another thing is that when that bugbear and that wolf died, I'm like, that's like the end of the adventure. Even though you still had to rescue that guy, and in that there was still like 6 goblins. And I'm thinking, and I thought, I go, the goblins have been really much tougher than Clark was. These guys, and then you guys roll really lousy against the goblins. So I go, so all is not lost. There's just a chance I might make one of these characters go down. And the only reason I would even say that thought, right, that I want one of the players to go down to 0 hit points, is to make it real, right? Like, you guys are doing dangerous things, and it could be detrimental to
I
the
believe
game.
that all of us felt that way without you having to kill us.
like, like I said, I didn't know how much damage you guys. I mean,
Well, this is what
okay.
you already know this, but
Okay.
we usually our friend Jim, one time he goes, "Why are you sitting down?" I go, "Because my character can't do anything else. She has like 1 hit point. What do you expect her to do?" He goes, "You can still fight." I go, "Yeah, but if you think about it, if you're that injured that 1 hit is going to take you out, unless you have unless you're like some superhuman with no nerve endings, you're not going to be able to get up and use your sword, right?
Correct.
Unless you're Boromir, right?"
Right. And he still had 1 hit point left at least.
He had, yeah.
Or he had, like, he was a barbarian or something, and had that
The rage,
the surge.
yeah.
Yes.
So usually like Mike probably knows, Sip probably knows that if I sit down, I'm probably not. I'm probably close to.
I remember he did that in Jim's game a long time ago. Now, you just sat down, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, she must be really hurt." And I mean, think about it. If you are,
Well, because I think it, and I don't play realistically, right? I'm swinging swords at goblins, okay?
Right,
So,
right.
but in my mind, as a historian and having read a lot of military stuff and realizing that when a person gets a slash through their shoulder or something, it's going to be a lot harder for them to swing a sword, right?
yeah, probably.
So in the battle, when that happens to me, I'm like, well, I could just keep, and like if I had 4 hit points, I would keep going, right? I'm all, like, I think of myself. I don't think of myself as Boromir, but I recently watched that movie, so I have him in my brain.
Of course.
You can keep going up to a certain point, but then you got to sit down sooner or later.
Yes.
That's the way that I think of it, right? Now I
Right.
know none of the boys would go with that. If they have 1 hit point, they're still gonna make
What boys are we
that.
talking about?
Augustine, Alan,
Oh,
Ian,
yeah.
they would still want to go and get one last swing in there to kill the monster.
Right. And I think it's very realistic for you to at 1 hit point say, man, yeah, sit down like kind of like I hate to use so many movie references, but the 13th Warrior, where at the very end, uh, Beowulf, well, he's not called Beowulf in the movie, but he is. He plants his sword down, he sits down, and he's gonna die, right? But he sits down and he has enough energy and wherewithal to sit down on that on whatever, and it looks like a throne to me at the very end. And if he had still had like 1 hit point, basically is what you're talking about, and he would just rest, right? If he wasn't poisoned, and he was just tired, you would sit down and say like, yeah, I need a breather, like kind of like the orcs who are running. Have Merry and Pippin, they've been running 3 days. And goes, we need to take a break. I'm tired, and in that situation, there's still a fight to fight, but it looks like it's going your way, and you're gonna take the time. You're like, okay, I got nobody in front of me. There's a battle off I can't really see, but I hope my friends can make it. But me, I'm gonna take a breather here because
I can't breathe.
I'm really hurt.
Yeah.
Or and then what are hit points, right? You get into that discussion. Oh, they're not really wounds. It's just it's a stress and tiredness and luck running out and all these other things. But really, because it kills you at the end when you go to zero. I mean, they are wounds of some sort, that afflict your character. So that seems a very logical thing to do. When you're down to 1 hit point, you're like, man, is this game real? Oh, it's too real.
Well, and then also, I think that stopping, not fighting at that last to so that you can get, you're not going to get hit one more time if you're sitting down unless there's somebody right next to you. And then what are you going to do, right?
Right.
But it does, like, I know Sip said, "Oh, she must be really low. she must be at the end," and so that he's the cleric, so he came towards me. I was like,
Yeah, he's a cleric, so I think he gave you a
and I
couple
think
hit
that's
points.
the way that it would happen
Right,
in
right.
a real battle. So I don't know if that's emotive, but that's the way that,
No, I
because
mean,
I see it as more realistic, right?
yeah, you're right, and that's what I mean. It makes sense. You wouldn't just keep fighting and say, "Oh, whatever." I can't even imagine. Even though I played that way, where I had 1 hit point and I just kept going.
I have done that, and I've been lucky not to die.
Right.
But
Lucky.
yeah, so I can see that as the big battle, how the GM felt. Oh, the player, I don't want to kill the players, but my town is going to get destroyed. I don't want to do this, right? Because somebody threw a fireball at one of her buildings, so she felt emotional that her town was being burned up.
Well, because okay, I think I've been in that situation before in the past where I think about the NPCs, right, and the town, and the women and the children, right, who inhabit that town, and when things are getting destroyed, buildings are getting destroyed, and you're like,
Collateral
yeah,
damage.
you're
Yeah.
thinking about people dying, and you're like, oh wow, their villages are being slaughtered, right, or whatever. You shouldn't look at that lightly as a character or as a GM. I mean, you do it for shock value sometimes. You do it to prove a point, prove it to how cruel the bad guy is and stuff. But it shouldn't be something that happens and nobody cares about, right?
Right.
So, for example, this last session, one goblin gave up, right? He's I'm done. You guys have killed everybody I know in this little the cave system. I'm the last one. I have 1 hit point left. I'm not going to be able to defeat. And you guys are what all big,
Except for the halfling.
the long walkers, right? Oh, except for the halfling. So he gives up, and then there's the moral quandary. What do you do with this guy? And so then there was like the discussion. Well, it was Mike. He goes, "Is this are goblins just evil, or what's going on with that?" I go, "Well, in original D&D, fifth edition, even their characters were considered neutral evil, but the direction we're going, the direction that D&D is going, and it doesn't make sense that creatures are just born evil, right? I understand that. I go, so no, they're not evil, but most people look at them as miscreants, right? Because they're like low in society totem pole. So I think that has a huge impact on what jobs or what things they believe they can do." He goes, "Oh, so they're not inherently evil?" No. He goes, "Okay." So the idea of summarily executing them, I think for Mike, went off the table at
Oh,
that
I
point.
think for everybody it did.
Well, or at least for Mike. I don't know about anybody else, but because like somebody said, yeah, just run them through. Did they? Somebody said that.
I don't know. I don't. I didn't.
What was it? So who's there? Bay?
I don't think Bay. Well, Bay did say to the god, or say, should I just kill him, or should we take him as prisoner? And then because we were trying to get him to talk, I think that was the motivation to try to get him to talk, right?
That was you guys.
He spoke Goblin because none of us did.
That's right. And then he talked common.
It went, yeah. Wait, I can tell you.
And then Mike goes, "Is he speaking common?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "That little bastard." So I think that's pretty cool. When
Well,
you can be angry at a non
and then when we got to
that doesn't exist.
the town, where Mike goes, or
Can we bring the goblin?
and Mike is like, he's all. That's when he was asking. He goes about the alignment and stuff. He
Yes.
goes, and then he's thinking, well, if we take the goblin into town, is it going to cause us problems? Do we really need the goblin? Is he going to give us any more information? And different kinds of things, right? And so there was a whole discussion about, can we just let the goblin go, or should we just kill him? And none of us are going to just kill him, because I don't think any of us players are that kind of player, right?
Right. Or even have an evil tendency.
So Felipe's all, no, we should just keep him. We can just tie him up and take him with us. And I'm like going, well, that's just going to cause us problems, right? We're going into a town with a goblin.
A town you've never been to.
Right. It's not going to work. So
You let him loose.
we did. And as we let him loose, I told him, if I see you again, or you're going to die, I will kill you if I see you again.
Yes, you did.
Because as a fighter, because I was a fighter, right? That's what I thought a fighter would say.
Sounds good. So I think that is the kind of like emotional investment you have in the game, right? If you didn't care about characters, if you didn't care about consequences and stuff, you would have just killed him. Well, he's better off dead. That way, he doesn't come up and bite us on the butt in the future. Raise a goblin army and smash everything in sight. Not that that's going to happen, but people think that way, right? The consequences for laying a bad little NPC.
Well, and someone gave him food, so it wasn't like, I mean, once you feed them, it's not like you can kill them.
That's true. It becomes real. So I think that's pretty cool. Now, the idea of getting super invested in the character, I think, and in things is probably not a good thing,
Right.
Because as a GM, I think, what is it? The saying, you have to kill your darlings like you do in a movie or something, or
I've never heard that saying. I don't think it's a saying.
It is. It is a literary thing, like in books and stuff. You have to kill the things that you love most, because then they become they become like supernatural, right? Nothing can touch them. Nothing can ever go wrong with.
Well, I think
characters.
this might be where the adversarial GM comes in.
Okay.
Because if you're too invested in those NPCs or your monsters,
Yes.
or whatever you're running, and you're like, well, how could they going to kill him in 3 hits? I'm going to get back at them for that, right? That's where the bad emotion comes in, right? And then because that's because we've talked about the adversarial GM, because
Yes.
it's a topic, right?
Right.
It's been a topic for years.
So
and
it does happen.
And I know that a lot of players that I play with at conventions, older people, they look at the GM askew, because they have that view that the GM is not for them, which in today's gaming is totally different, right? It's
Right.
not, most GMs are for their players. They're not going to try to kill them just because they're angry that they killed their big bad guy.
Right. Too soon or too
You're right.
fast. Yes.
Well, you ruined the game for me.
You're right. And I think you're right. I think that's too much investment.
Yes.
And that's bad
You
for
should not cross that line.
right. So as a player and as a GM, those are things you should consider, right? Is am I too invested in this character or in this NPC for my players to be able to get them? Or if I do crazy things and I die, my character as a player, am I gonna have am I gonna
Am I going to
lose it?
break down and cry at the
Yes,
table?
and I think you should, as everybody should, 'cause, we're supposed to be having fun, and I think the proper not proper amount of fun, but the proper way to play, where you're not too invested, and the other extreme is where you don't care at all. I think when you have hit that happy medium somewhere in the middle, I think that's when the best playing happens because you're having fun. You're not worried about your character dying at every corner, and you invested all this time and energy for the backstory. You have the family tree all ironed out and figured out. You're thinking about the future of what's going to happen to this character in the future and what you want to happen. That's all fine and dandy, but always have the idea that, well, if I do things wrong, or even
If the dice roll is bad.
if the dice roll just happens to go the wrong way and the lightning bolt hits you and instead of doing average damage, it does near maximum damage and fries your character, I think you should be able to handle that like wow and not break down and start having to break down and just make everybody feel comfortable. You can shed a tear like, oh, he was one of my favorite characters. And I think when something like that happens, I think it is a pivotal moment in a campaign when a character dies. And it should be emotional a little bit, but it shouldn't break the table. And you shouldn't like get your stuff and leave because this is terrible.
Okay, I'm dead. I'm done. It also depends on the game you're playing. Because if
Yeah.
you're playing Call of Cthulhu, the GMs that we play with have extra characters just in case someone dies, right? So you can, or sometimes they'll tell you make 2 characters, and then you know not to get too invested in the.
Well, and then we we came from KublaCon a month ago, and I played in a alien game, and in Alien, the chances are you're not going to make it.
It's a really heavy chance you're not going to make it.
So we had but my character actually I lived to the very end. At the very end, I had to get another character because I lost a leg and my arm was broken and I was very hurt. So
But when you're playing a game like that, there's extra. Usually the GM or they'll tell they'll have extra characters,
and that's exactly what he had.
because this is a possibility that you're going to either be infected by an alien and it's going to come squirting out of your chest, or you're going to die.
Right, and so in that sense, when there's a high kill rate, usually GMs have extra characters. So, I mean, but I was still invested. I didn't want my character to die. I wanted him. I mean, I know the game, right? I know it's an alien game. I know it's a deadly game. We have 2-3 hit points, right? Guns do 4 or 5 and stuff like that. So I know it's deadly, but I was trying to play as safe as I could and as smart as I could, knowing that we're just human and we're
Squishy.
squishy. That's a proper term. I mean, and not only squishy against aliens, because we hadn't even encountered aliens at that moment. We were just encountering other bad guys,
Right.
Other humans who were not being very nice to us. But
You're still squishy.
yeah, still squishy. So a lot of people, their characters a lot of players went through 2 characters. I think I was the sole person that my character made it to the end, I think. Hurt. Missing a leg, but he was still alive. Okay, so I think that lady's doing nothing wrong, who was a little bit emotive about a thing, but people can't let that stop them from enjoying the game, because if they're too invested and they're worried or get upset about losing NPCs, losing the damage done to your town and stuff, I think that might make it hard for you to continue to role play and run the game. If that happens, then maybe you got to take a couple steps back and look at it from a little bit more distant, and still be you're still going to be invested in your game, but not as closely tied to the results of the game.
And since she'd only been GMing for a year, I think that the longer she GMs,
Yes.
and that's what a lot of the people were saying, was you'll get used to the fact that you're going to create a lot of stuff and you're making a world for these people to play in, and what they do is not necessarily what you think is going to happen. So you're just going to keep throwing out new things for them, and you're going to learn that you can be in it as invested as you want in it, but it could get destroyed, right?
Right.
And not to worry so much because you can create another world.
And I think as you GM more, you're going to get that GM toughened skin thing, right? Or things are not going to matter as much because they just can't, because otherwise you're just going to be catatonic by the end of the game.
You destroyed my town.
And everybody in it, or you didn't save the town or something.
You
like that.
didn't do it the way you were supposed
Right.
to.
So I think somewhere in the middle is where you want your campaign to be, as far as investment by players and the GM, because the GM is a player too. And I think that's when the best role playing is when characters are invested enough to care about the situation that's happening. They care about the NPCs a little bit, and the GM is in the same position. They're just not throwing things out there for the players to kill. They're weaving stories and making connections between NPCs and player characters, and making a good story, which is what we are doing. And we're playing role playing at the same time. We're having fun, solving problems and having adventures.
So there you go. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul,
Angeline.
and you have a good day.